The following program is a special presentation of the Big Ten Network, produced in association with the University of Wisconsin.
He grew up in Wausau, Wisconsin, wanted to be a teacher, perhaps even a professor. But after graduating from Madison, fate and timing conspired to make him one of the most powerful politicians in America and one of the longest reigning public servants in American history. He is legendary for his candor and his directness. By his own admission, he does not mind raising a little hell for the right cause. And who knows, he may even raise a little hell in the next hour, so you might want to hang on and see what happens next on Wisconsin Reflections. In true Wisconsin tradition, he is a staunch progressive and a Democrat. His constituents in the 7th Congressional cover the upper left quarter of the state of Wisconsin, from Stevens Point to the shores of Lake Superior, and they have sent him back to Washington every 2 years for the last 4 decades through 8 presidents. When he retires in 2011, he will rank among the 20th longest-serving members of the United States House of Representatives in American history. He's Congressman Dave Obey, and he's with us today. Dave, thanks so much, and congratulations. What a run. What a run.
Thank you.
In your announcement announcing your retire, which sent political shockwaves through American politics, you said you were bone tired. Were you bone tired of being a congressman, or just bone tired from the commute? What made you so tired?
Well, mostly it was explaining to angry constituents why you don't win if you get 51% of the votes in the United States Senate. I mean, the Senate rules absolutely destroy accountability in this country. They confuse the public. They think the Democratic Party's in control when they in fact aren't, because of the filibuster rule and because of the secret holds that they have. And I just got awfully sick and tired. Besides, after participating in putting together 41 budgets, it does get
That's a lot of math.
It does get a little stale.
It's a lot of earmarks, and you raged against earmarks, sometimes much to the chagrin of your compatriots, correct?
No, that's not correct.
Okay.
The earmarks are a very small portion of the budget.
Right.
And I have argued for restraint in earmarks. I mean, the first earmark that the Congress provided was in 1790, in the very first Congress, $1,200 for a lighthouse in Maine. So the Congress has always earmarked. It's a question of which programs you earmark in, and whether or not you have such a heavy preponderance of earmarks in any given bill that it destroys the ability to actually have real competition, which produces quality. Yeah. So it's like everything else in life. It's a lot more complicated than that.
Right. Is it the tension between what you want to get done and what could get done? Did that make you weary over time?
Well, what really made me weary over time was just the incredibly sour nature of politics and the meanness of it all, and the money. I mean, when I ran for the state legislature, I spent $1,160. When I ran for Congress, the first time I spent about $45,000. My opponent spent $75,000. This year, the race to succeed me will probably cost a couple of $1 million. That means that members.
And there are not a lot of big media markets in your district.
No.
You know, I mean, makes it even more amazing.
I mean, that means that the average member of Congress spends an awful lot of time simply dialing for dollars. That's not a very gratifying way to spend your time. And it just, after a while, you just think there's more to life than this.
How are things on the civility scale compared to when you came in '69, replacing Melvin Laird?
Well, what's different is that if you are a moderate Republican today, and if you try to work with Democrats, as many of them have through the years, you get chewed up by the radical right. The Club for Growth will run a primary against you. Ask Marge Rukema. Ask Mike Castle, who everyone assumed because he was so well respected in his state as a moderate Republican that he would be elected to the U.S. Senate. Instead, he got derailed because, horror of horrors, he compromised once in a while. I mean, compromise is the essence of politics. You don't. It doesn't mean you're unprincipled if you take a look at the situation and recognize this is the best you can get. And if you have a choice between something and nothing, take something and come back again next year.
Well, the term the loyal opposition you don't hear very often anymore.
It's because it's not very loyal. What I find appalling is the fact that the minority in the Senate, I'll admit that Mitch McConnell has been brilliant politically, but at the cost of destroying the ability of the system to function.
Did the Democrats play that game as well?
Not nearly to the extent that the Republicans do. I mean, filibusters used to be used maybe once, maybe twice a year. Now they've been used well over 100 times in one session alone. For every single major issue that comes up.
And what does that mean to the citizens?
They turn into a filibuster. It means nothing gets done. And it also means that the public is confused because they say, gee, the Democrats are in control. Why can't they get this done? Why were we stuck for 8 months watching the Senate try to put together a health care bill? Because the minority was determined, the minority leadership was determined to deny Obama anything. And this isn't new. I mean, I saw this the first year that I was in the state legislature back in 1963. Everybody knew that Phil Keene, the Republican Party chairman, was going to be the next governor after Gaylord Nelson went to Washington. Only the voters surprised people and elected John Reynolds. The reaction of the Republican leadership in the legislature was to simply reach a decision to deny Reynolds any victory on anything. And they stonewalled virtually everything he did for 2 years. They bet that because they were anonymous and Reynolds was well known, he'd take the heat. And it worked. He was the only Democratic governor in the '64 Johnson landslide not to be reelected.
When we come back,
this is what's happening at the federal level today.
When we come back, I'm going to ask you if there's cause for hope on any front, because it sounds pretty depressing. On top of the economy,
well,
on top of two wars.
So I don't know if there's ever cause for hope.
You're uncomfortable with despair. We're in Madison. We're with Congressman Dave Obey, and we'll be back.
This program is a production of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. If you have comments about this broadcast, please email them to programming@uc.wisc.edu.
Where others saw lumber, we recognized a treasure. Where others saw the night, we chose the stars. Where others saw pieces, we unlocked the puzzle that could mean the end of paralysis and cancer. Since 1848, thinkers and achievers at Wisconsin have fearlessly sought ideas that transform the world. Keep on, Wisconsin. Keep on.
Hey everybody, we're back in Madison. We're with Congressman Dave Obey. Frankly, one of the greatest, longest runs in Congress in American history. And it started back in, you're going to have to help me with the town in Oklahoma that you were born in.
Okmulgee.
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 And then you moved to Wausau when you were very young, correct?
Well, my family was from Wausau, but the week that my folks got married, my dad lost his job. And my mother's uncle ran a J.C. Penney store in Okmulgee, Oklahoma, and he said, Orv, it ain't much, but I got an opening in the shoe department. If you want it, it's yours. So that's why I tell people my dad was the only man in America who moved to Oklahoma during the Depression to get a job.
In the Dust Bowl, yeah. But you were essentially raised in Wausau, right?
Yeah.
Came to school here in Madison?
First at the University Branch campus in Wausau.
Gotcha.
For my first 2 years, and then down here in 1958 as a transfer.
What kind of student were you?
I was a decent student. I was not an outstanding student because I didn't spend a lot of time. I spent most of my time in political campaigns working for candidates. But I wound up, I was a B or B plus student.
And The legend has it that the Democrats and Congress and the people of the 7th have Joe McCarthy to thank you for being the longest standing Democrat to ever to be a congressman from your district, or frankly from Wisconsin, I would guess, in Wisconsin history. Tell us about how you went from being a Republican to being a Democrat and how Joe McCarthy helped you with that.
Well, my mother was a Republican, and my dad was kind of neutral. And when I was in 7th grade, I participated in a debate on Joe McCarthy, and that's when I started getting interested in politics. And when I was in high school, I worked for the Young Republicans. I distributed literature all over town in 1952 for Eisenhower and McCarthy and Mel Laird. And then I discovered when I was as a junior in high school, I learned what McCarthy supporters on the school board had tried to do a couple of years earlier to a teacher of mine by the name of Arthur Henderson, who was my high school history teacher, and a superb teacher. And they accused him of being a Bolshevik. Mm-hmm. And that enraged me, and I thought,
because he wore a beret, or why? I mean,
because he had the temerity to teach that the platform of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce was not necessarily synonymous with the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And so that just infuriated me, and I thought, if that's what the Republican Party is like in this county, ain't no room for a kid like me.
You're a legendary Wisconsin politician. How was McCarthy able to gain traction in Wisconsin? Isn't it a little bit of an, as a native Wisconsinite myself, it's pretty embarrassing, and you like to think it's an aberration, but how did he ever happen? Do you ever find yourself asking that?
Well, I mean, he was elected because of an historical accident. Young Bob La Follette, mm-hmm. who served from 25 until 46 in the Senate, stayed in Washington most of the time in that 46 election in order to shove through the Congressional Reorganization Act of 1946. Mm-hmm. He was the main sponsor of it. It modernized the Congress, but he didn't get home. At the same time, the Progressive Party in Wisconsin was dying, and so McCarthy beat him by just a handful of votes. And I think if you also look deeper, Wisconsin has always had a history of split level politics. I mean, the state has elected Joe McCarthy, but it's also elected Gaylord Nelson and Bob Kastenmeier.
Right.
Far different people. I think the strain that runs through that is a heavy dose of populism. Mm-hmm.
Going back to your experiences on campus here, is there a teacher who affected you in the way you view the world from your studies here, or a course?
Oh, a lot of them were awfully good.
And you studied Russian history, or?
I was a poli-sci major, and then in grad school I was in the Russian Area Studies program.
Gotcha.
John Armstrong was my grad student advisor. As an undergrad, Ralph Hewitt. Mm-hmm. Ralph Hewitt was one of the great teachers of all time. He was from Fort Worth, Texas. He worked for LBJ, and he worked for Bill Proxmire, and he taught politics as it existed, not as somebody wished it was.
Not theory and execution.
Yeah, and he taught the legislative process. Very thoughtful, very shrewd, and he was probably the best teacher I had here. Mike Petrovich in the history department was spectacular. George Mossy,
right, legendary
absolutely,
teacher. Yeah.
Absolutely wonderful.
When we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit about the media's effect on politics today, the rise of cable television as a voice in daily political discourse. We're in Madison. We're with Congressman Dave Obey, and please stay with us. You never know what he's going to say next.
Great People is our campaign for need-based scholarship aid. It's the key to the long-term well-being of the university as a whole.
In 1970, tuition cost about $500.
Today, it's about $9,000.
We don't want UW-Madison to be a university that is deemed to be out of reach.
The Great People Scholarship gives students a chance to succeed in life.
Support the Great People Scholarship. Visit uwgreatpeople.org.
Hey, we're back in Madison. Are we back in Madison? Sorry. Are we up? Let's try that again, shall we? Hey everybody, we're back in Madison in Vilas Hall. We're with Congressman Dave Obey. Dave, a leading question. How has the media landscape changed since you first took office in '69, and has it changed for the better or the worse?
Well, if you take a look at local newspapers today, when I entered politics, I had mostly Republican newspapers in my district, but they were quality papers. And the reporters had been around a long time. In Wausau, for instance, you had Niels Nielsen, Win Freund. They knew City Hall. They knew state issues. They knew federal issues.
Define quality as how? Fairness?
They know what they're talking about. They know substance, and they know enough to ask an intelligent follow-up question. Mm-hmm. And today, you find very few experienced reporters on papers. And you're lucky if the newspapers contain 3 stories on national news. The rest are just features and ads. They become carriers of advertising primarily. If, in addition to that, you have the 24-hour news cycle, the plague of CNN, and you know what happens if you're a liberal, you watch Rachel Maddow. If you're a conservative, you watch Fox. If you don't know what you think, you watch CNN. Mm-hmm. And you never hear other opinions. So your views are never challenged. People seem to go to the channels that suit their comfort level. And so you don't have the cross-pollination that you ought to have.
Are there any journalists you respect in Washington?
Oh,
Do you think that there are people who cover the beat that people should pay attention to because they're even-handed and fair and know what they're writing about?
Well, the best
reporting about.
Well, the best reporter on Capitol Hill is David Rogers. He used to be with the Wall Street Journal. Now he's with Politico. Mm-hmm. Whenever I see Dave coming, I like to go the other way because he's always going to ask me something I don't want him to know.
Right. But coming from you, that's high praise, correct?
He is superb. Dave Broder is a terrific columnist.
And Politico is an online political.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not thrilled about Politico, but they do have some quality reporters there.
You held Tim Russert in high regard.
Tim was terrific. E.J. Dionne is terrific.
At the Washington Post.
David Brooks is terrific. He doesn't much care for me. Number of others.
There is some, evidence to indicate that people are getting tired of the shrillness, the average folks.
I wish I could see that evidence.
Well, Jon Stewart, there's research that indicates that a satirist is actually the most popular political commentator in America. And there's precedence for this with Will Rogers, Mark Twain. Sure. This is not a one-off. And that he's a voice of reason in the midst of these kind of polarized, shrill demagogues on either side. Do you see the political process getting its arms around this fragmentation of media to the point where the conversation can be elevated a little bit, or do you think that people continue to exploit it?
No, I think it's getting far worse. I mean, we today have one television network that is devoted solely to the idea that they want to destroy the opposite political party, and that's Fox News. Mm-hmm. And then you have so many other newspapers that are running into trouble financially, so they have to lay off hundreds and hundreds of people. And there are all over 300 communities who used to have somebody covering the House of Representatives who don't anymore because they can't afford it.
And do you think this is a threat to the democracy?
Yeah, I think it is, because for the life of me, I don't know how a citizen living in a small town gets enough good quality information in order to really feel informed when they walk into the voting booth. They certainly don't get it from cable news anymore. I mean, everything on cable news is breathless, and it's all the same.
Yep.
And with newspapers, you just don't have enough inches anymore to write thoughtful stories.
Well, when we come back, maybe we can talk a little bit about some solutions and maybe some cause somewhere for some hope, so that we know that things will carry on okay without you in office. We'll be right back with Dave Obey. I have a very simple question for you, Congressman Obey. How big should the government be? It seems like this is a question that America has struggled with for its entire history. We actually had a civil war over it to a certain extent. How big should government be? Because that's what Democrats always get laid at their feet.
It ought to be big enough to defend the country when it needs to, and it ought to be big enough to keep the big boys honest.
That's a good, succinct answer. And is it?
No.
And how can that be rectified?
Well, you can have stronger oversight of Wall Street. You can have stronger oversight of businesses, so that investors and consumers alike aren't threatened by people who will make a buck at any cost.
Were you surprised by the crash of the bubble, the real estate bubble? Did you see it coming, or? Well,
everybody saw it coming. I mean, people wrote about it for years. I used to be a real estate broker. I mean, what was going on in real estate, was clearly unsustainable. But the real and I'll say something that's very counterintuitive. I think the best vote I cast in my life, and I think the most courageous vote, was the vote that George Bush asked us to cast on TARP to prevent the collapse of the financial markets.
Right.
And I think that we were very lucky that Paulson could convince George Bush to ask for that, because God knows Bush didn't want to. And I think we were very lucky that Obama and McCain supported it, although McCain has since started to bob and weave on it. Without that action, we would have had a horrendous collapse of the financial markets around the world, a horrendous collapse of the economy. And I mean, that issue today is still plaguing anybody who voted for it. It's the most unpopular vote that I think I've cast since, or that I've seen. It's the most unpopular action I've seen Congress take since the Panama Canal Treaty, which cost us about 8 senators after they voted for that.
What I think some voters, myself included, wonder is how did it get to that stage to begin with? TARP seems to be about, getting the horses back in the barn. How did they get out to begin with? How did the securitized mortgage market kind of become a virus that affected the global economy?
This answer will take a little time.
Okay.
The fact is that if you take, you have to start with the way income is parceled out in this country these days. I mean, we went from having the most egalitarian distribution of income of any industrialized country to having the most elitist distribution of income in history. We used to think of Great Britain with the House of Lords and the King and Queen as a class-based society. But today, the proportion of income that goes to the top 10% in the society in comparison to everybody else is worse than it is in Great Britain. And so what has happened is that literally since let's say 1978, you have had...
Which includes both Republican and Democratic Congresses and presidents.
Yes, but you've had the largest transfer of income up the income scale in the history of the universe. Everybody's wages, everybody's income has stayed flat or declined in real terms except for the top. If you add to that government actions on taxes, which continually favored the most wealthy. If you add to that the steady stream of deregulation, which started in the last year and a half of Carter, continued with a vengeance under Ronald Reagan, moderated somewhat, but not much under Clinton, and then also continued with a vengeance under the Bushes. And you had a situation in which there was nobody minding the store. There was a reason that we passed Glass-Steagall back in the 30s, for instance, because Congress did not want community banks to be infected by the casino mentality of Wall Street gamblers. But that was allowed to happen again. And then if you couple it with what happened in housing, the whole house of cards collapsed, and Obama inherited that god-awful mess. And we're going to, and this is a different kind of a recession. This is a financial recession. So we're not going to see a recovery nearly as fast as we saw in other recessions that were not primarily financial based. And so I think we're going to be struggling to see wages increase for a good long time.
And you know what? When we come back,
until we gain more
tell
public
me,
confidence.
I'd love you to look in the crystal ball and say how long, because that's what people are worried about. How long will this last? And when we come back, we're going to ask Dave what Republicans he actually liked. We'll be back. We're in Madison. We're back in Madison with an historic figure, one of the longest lasting congressmen in American history, Dave Obey. 41 years, how many days now?
Not counting.
And he has announced the fact that he's not running again. And, you know, before we go any further, regardless of people's political persuasion, thank you for serving.
Thank you.
How long will the recession last? When will we start to feel better?
Oh, nobody knows the answer to that question.
But if anyone would, you might.
No, I mean, the smartest economists in the world don't
3 to 5?
know. I have no idea. All I will say is that it will take a long time before you have created enough jobs in this economy and to make people feel comfortable, because public confidence has been shattered so much. Because when the financial sector collapses, that's the heart of the capitalist system.
Right.
And it takes a long time to restore equilibrium and confidence.
Are there any Republicans that you thought were great men or women?
Absolutely. I mean, let's start with presidents. When Jerry Ford came back to the House to visit with us about a year and a half before about a year before he died, I grabbed him and I said, Jerry, I want you to know I just finished a book, and I ranked the presidents I served with, and I ranked you #1 as the best. And he put his hand on my shoulder and said, damn slim pickings, wasn't it? But he was great. Mel Laird is an absolutely superb human being, and it was a superb member of Congress. Bill Steiger, Bill and I went to college together here. We were in the legislature together. We were good buddies until he died.
Who would it surprise people that you worked well with from the other side of the aisle?
Jim Sensenbrenner.
Yeah?
Yeah, Jim and I agree about once a century, but I like him. We work together a lot. I mean, Bob Livingston, who, when I was chairman of Foreign Operations Subcommittee, I was very lucky in my ranking members. I had Jack Kemp, who was a civilized human being and smart. I had Mickey Edwards, who was head of the Conservative Caucus and the Republican Caucus. I had Bob Livingston, who later became chairman of the full committee and almost became speaker. All terrific people, pragmatists, and were personal friends as well as associates.
What was Charlie Wilson like? Of Charlie Wilson's War, he went on to be portrayed by Tom Hanks. He just passed this past year, but Charlie Wilson's War is one of the most interesting books I've ever read, and it wasn't a bad movie either. What was Charlie like? Charlie
was absolutely outrageous. He was also smart as all get out.
Yeah.
He knew his stuff. And I used him, when I was chairman of the committee, I used him as my conservative anchor within the Democratic side of the committee in order to keep things balanced enough that I had a bill that could actually pass.
What does it say about appropriations that he could actually wage a war that way?
Well, I mean, what he did was under the table, on the covert side, he got missiles to those fighting the Russians, And on the overt side, we provided the overt aid, which provided the mules and other things that carry the stingers.
Right.
But, people didn't know what they were carrying.
You talked about jobs and the economy. What role does the university, this is on the Big Ten Network, some of the greatest universities in America are part of the Big Ten. What role does higher education play in this long crawl out of this economy?
Well, I'm very concerned about that. Because if you take a look at what's happening in this country, we have slipped from 1st to 12th in the percentage of population that graduates from college. That is very, very troublesome.
How has that happened? How have we let that happen?
We've let it happen. Well, all I can tell you is at the state level, when I left the legislature, about 41% of the university's operating budget came from the state budget, came from the legislature. Today it's what, 17, 18%?
How much of that has to do with secondary education and how many, when we come back, we'll ask that. We're going to take some questions from the audience too. Okay. We're going to go to a break. But what I'd like to find out is, are we getting enough secondary students who envision themselves as college students as well? So we'll be back with Dave Obey in Madison. Stay with us. Hi, we're back in Madison. I was looking for my camera. If I was a congressman for 41 years, I would always know where the camera was, but I haven't been. Dave, we're going to take some questions from the audience, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, great. First question.
Hi, I'm Terry Shelton. With the 100th anniversary of 2 books celebrating the Wisconsin idea coming up in 2012, do you think that the state can regain its prominence in social policy, advancing social policy and progressivism?
I would like to think so, but very frankly, I'm appalled that right now, Congressman Ryan, for instance, from the southeastern part of the state, has produced a piece of legislation which I think is a betrayal of the whole La Follette progressive tradition. When you produce legislation which cuts the effective tax rates of the wealthiest 10% by 2/3, when you essentially want to install roughly an 8.5%, what in effect is a sales tax. When you want to privatize Medicare and voucherize, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. When you privatize Social Security and voucherize Medicare, those all go against the whole history of Wisconsin. The whole history of Wisconsin has been that you try to create conditions which help everybody in society. You don't follow trickle-down economics, as Hubert Humphrey used to call it. You follow percolate-up economics, and I'm stunned that that kind of legislation is being produced by somebody who I think is really countering virtually everything Wisconsin politics has stood for since the days of Bob La Follette.
We have another question. I hope that answered your question. Hi, what's your name? What's your question?
Hi, I'm John Quinlan, and I was telling you ahead of time, I first met Dave when I was 4, and our families were neighbors up in Wausau.
Oh, okay.
But I lived most of my adult life in Madison, where I've worked on a lot of campaigns, but I think 2 months that I spent in 1992 working back in Wausau were where I learned the most about effective politicking and learning how to work in common cause with folks. Could you reflect a little on the folks back in the 7th CD who kept the home fires burning for you? Folks like Jerry and Nelda and Wynn and the folks from A Better Way, and anyway, the folks that really kept things going there.
Well, I mean, you cannot survive in politics if you don't have a large cadre of people who will go out and hit the hustings for you. I've been very lucky. Jerry Madison ran my district office for almost 30 years. Wynn Spencer, who was the office manager, was there for almost 30 years. In my Washington office, Scott Lilly was with me for 30-some years. Christine Hamilton was with me almost 20. Paul Carver is with me more than 20. When you can retain people on your staff who have an institutional memory, that helps, because when a problem comes up, they have enough experience to remember, to put it in context and to remember how this related to something that happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
Dave,
and it also helps if they're nice people, which they usually have been.
Dave, a lot of people would say the northern part of Wisconsin would be naturally Republican. Certainly Green Bay historically has been Republican. Do you think it's because you're a Democrat or a progressive that they like you up there, or because you're honest and you've got a little fight in you and that's how they feel?
I don't know. All I know is that...
Because, there was not a long Democratic tradition of your seat.
No, there was a progressive tradition.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had lots of progressives, La Follette progressives,
right.
I mean, who represented northern Wisconsin. You had Barney Gehrman, you had Jerry Boileau, people like that.
When we come back, you can name some more of them, and we're going to take some more questions from the audience, okay?
All
We're
right.
back. We're in Madison with Dave Obey. Hi, we're back in Madison. I was just talking with Dave Obey. He's only been in Congress 41 years. We've got another question here in the audience. What's your name? What's your question?
Yeah, my name is Senai, and I'm a student at the La Follette School. Earlier, you touched on your frustration with the Senate and the image of a Congress that isn't getting anything done. I was wondering if you could maybe go into a little more detail about how the working relationship between the House and the Senate has changed over your career, and what you think might be done to help, repair that image of a do-nothing Congress.
Well, I think it's ironic that some people think the Congress has that image because this was one of the most massively productive Congresses that I've seen in my lifetime. You may not like it, but the fact is the stimulus package did provide jobs for 2.5 million people who otherwise wouldn't have had it. We did pass a health care reform bill, which is going to take the insurance companies out of the driver's seat in insurance. We did pass a re-regulation of Wall Street banks and a lot of other things, credit card reform. But the problem is that in the Senate you have they can do two things that screw up public accountability. First is by simply requiring that you have 60 votes rather than 51 to pass anything. That means the minority is in effective control if they choose to use the filibuster every time. Secondly, when senators can have secret holds, when Senator Shelby, for instance, put a hold on every single White House appointment because he wanted the White House to buy into his request for a very large piece of pork for his district. That's just illegitimate. And to me, it's going to be very hard to restore credibility as long as people use that kind of obstructive power every day. In politics, it is sometimes important to exercise restraint. Sometimes you shouldn't do something just because you can for the good of the order.
Dave, you're leaving Congress. Someone listening to this interview could glean from you that the economy's awful, the media's not good, the political system isn't what it used to be, it's going to take us forever to get out of the economy. So there's kind of an après moi le déluge sort of sense of what you're saying here. So for 90 seconds, tell us what we can be hopeful about and what we can feel good about our country.
Well, I mean, Herb Stein, who was one of the economic advisors to Richard Nixon, used to say, people say this can't go on. He said, it's my experience that if something can't go on, it stops. And I do think that sooner or later the system stabilizes. I do think that sooner or later we will have a change in practice in the Senate. I do think that sooner or later the economy will begin to produce enough jobs to make the country comfortable again. And I do think that I desperately hope this is right, but I do believe that the country will come to realize that we have got to put a much higher value on education, both elementary and secondary and college education. We simply are not going to lead the world if we continue to fall behind in terms of educational achievement. So, I mean, these are all tough problems. But we've had tougher problems than these through the years. Certainly we had the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War I and World War II. Those are all worse than the situation we're in now. And I think sooner or later the ship of state will right itself. That doesn't mean it's going to be pleasant.
Now, nothing has ever been made worse by the playing of a harmonica. And so if you would indulge us when we come back, will you play a little harmonica? Because Dave is a good harmonica player and has been known to entertain people that way, and maybe we thought you could entertain us a little with that. Would you be willing to do it?
If the audience won't rush out of here.
We'll be back. Wait till you hear this. What's your take on Obama?
This program is a production of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. If you have comments about this broadcast, please email them to programming@uc.wisc.edu.
We're back with Congressman Dave Obey, and he's going to serenade us with his harmonica in G. But before, we've got just a couple minutes. You were talking about the role that universities can play in this in restarting the economy and restarting, reclaiming America's role. Can universities do this with business as usual? What is incumbent upon them in terms of change or new thinking to make them more dynamic, a part of the solution?
It's a hard question. I'm not sure I know the answer. I don't think, I do think universities need to understand that they will rise or fall in the end, dependent upon what public policy is as it relates to education. Mm-hmm. And I think they need to understand that if they're going to make more room for education on the national agenda, they're going to have to fight for it. Mm-hmm. It's nice to be bipartisan, but bipartisanship means that you get support from both parties.
Right.
And if you don't, Samuel Gompers used to say labor unions should reward their friends and punish their enemies. Mm-hmm. And so I think that...
So a little more bare-knuckled is what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that I think that students need to recognize that the degree of public support they get for education is directly determined by how people vote in the political process, and they ignore it at their peril.
Gotcha. So it's not often that you get a 41-year member of Congress to play you out of a show, but you have a harmonica in your pocket. How long have you been playing harmonica?
Since I was 10.
Really?
Yeah.
And how good are you?
Good enough to play in public, not good enough to get paid for it.
Would you mind playing us out a little bit?
Okay.
What song are you playing, and why is this a song that you like to play?
Well, it's what I played at Gaylord Nelson's memorial service.
And he meant a lot. He was your mentor, was he not?
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet.
So is this in honor of him or your career?
Him.
Swing away. And thanks for joining us today.
You bet.
Thanks, Dave. Dave Obey, everybody. Thank you so much, Dave. Thanks. What a pleasure. Thanks for Dave for joining us. Thanks for being with us today on Wisconsin. Thanks, everybody.
The preceding program was produced by the University of Wisconsin in association with the Big Ten Network.